So, family? You got kids?
Yes, all of them were a surprise. Didn't know what any of them were going to be.
Oh, you didn't find out
No,
beforehand.
nope.
Oh, wow.
I always said like that was the one thing that no one could ever like accidentally tell, or it's just 100% a surprise.
And you liked that. I guess you did
Yes.
because you did it each time.
Yeah, I did.
And your husband was okay with that?
I mean, he wanted to know, of course, but he went with it.
You put your foot down. So, thank you for joining us for another Sidewalk Conversation. So glad to have you here today. And I have a very interesting guest that I'm sure you will enjoy. But before we introduce you to her, I want to say a thank you to our sponsor this week. We have a new sponsor, and it's called Amasuk. It is a handbag company, and you can find them. It's all online, Amasouk. We will link it below. But if you like handbags, and it's, graduation time and all the things that are around the summer, you got to take things to the beach, you want to check out Amasuk. And I think you will find some great options there, both from Mexico, Japan, and Morocco. All kinds of, and it's great company because they make sure that the artisans get the majority of the resources that are entrusted to them. So check them out. Today, I have Billie. Now, you're going to have to help me again with the name.
Logiudice.
Logiudice.
Right.
When you see the spelling, you'll know why I had some trouble. And so thank you for joining us today,
Yeah,
Billie.
thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
it. So one of the things we do at the start of the interview, you're quite well known in the area here because of all the things you've been involved with in your life. But maybe for those who are watching, it might be interesting to know a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and then we'll get into what you're doing now.
Yeah, I love it. So I am an Army brat. I was born in New York and then shortly after moved to um, what was then Fort Hood. We spent some time in Germany, several years, and then came right back to Fort Hood, Killeen area, which is where I grew up.
Okay.
I feel kind of lucky because we got to stay. My dad left often, for deployments and stuff, but that allowed us to, have some roots and
Oh, good. Yeah.
yeah.
And who were some of your key influences growing up?
That's a great question. I always have to think back. I mean, I had some really good teachers. I had some teachers that taught me lessons and maybe they were hard ones, but I always go back to my like educators, principals, which may be why I was so drawn to education and still,
Yeah, because that's a large part of what you
mhm.
do now. You still have a great passion for that.
Yeah.
You were on the school board, I think, for a while, right? Is that
Mhm.
true? Yeah.
I am
Oh, you
still.
still
Yeah.
are. All right. Well, there you go.
Just sworn in for my 6th term.
Wow. Great.
Um,
Congratulations.
mhm.
You are a great person to have on the board.
Thank you.
Now, here in the Austin area, you are now serving with the Chamber of Commerce, and you've also been involved with nonprofit work. And, anytime I meet people who have like that orientation towards service, I'm always curious, like what prompted that? Like what created the interest? Because it's not usually the money
Yeah.
and it's not the notoriety. It's basically about serving people. So talk us through a little bit about your career, kind of some of the places that you served, and then why that's been so important to you.
I think that yes, service has been a large part of my adult life, and really if I am thinking about this question, even back into my childhood, I can see where that started. I just told the story the other day, when I was in fourth grade, so 8, 9 years old. Um, I turned my whole bedroom into a classroom to include a library, a whole like library with
Nice.
and I like had the neighbors, all of the neighborhood kids coming over after school so I could tutor them. Um, and I even took that a step further and, had conferences with their parents who entertained this little 8 and 9 year old girl.
That's perfect.
Um, so, when I think back to, I
Yeah.
think about, I see that, starting way back then, but,
I take
you
it
know,
that you really enjoyed school then. Like there must have
uh,
been something about the whole environment that really captured you.
yeah, I think that school was my safe place.
Okay.
So when you talk about, influences and in my past, I felt like that is where, I was encouraged and yeah, and my kids will, say today, we're not like you, Mom. School is not. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I you know, um, started when my kids were young. Their dad was deployed a lot, so um, that allowed me to kind of go where they went. And so I started serving in our children's ministry shortly after I became a believer, which now it's about 26 years ago. Um, started serving and learning all the things about children's ministry, and, eventually went on staff as the assistant children's director, and then later to be the director of a couple of different churches. So, um, I don't know. I just have that in me to leave the world a better place, to leave, that legacy for my kids of
Yeah.
you can make a difference. Maybe your gifts are not the same as mine, but the world needs what everybody has to offer. And if I'm not modeling that, if I say that, but I'm not doing that, then
Kind
what?
of rings hollow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then you
and
did some nonprofit work too, right?
mm-hmm.
I mean, you were the
Yeah,
director of the nonprofit for, that's, I think, where we first met.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a nonprofit teen center, which we got started shortly after one of our good family friends and my oldest son. They were the same age. Madeline Haynes committed suicide, and family friends, we got together, and her parents really felt compelled to do the same. Like, let's use this to impact the future generations and to create a safe place where teens, largely middle school and high school students, can come and have trusted adults in their world that aren't their parents,
Right.
who they say this, same old thing, and but really expand that network, because we know that these teens are the first to know when something is going down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so again, just that idea that, if we believe that, then let's do something with that.
I
And
love it.
you know, I I just adore working with young people and seeing them flourish, and seeing them struggle through, things, and navigate life, and try to wrestle with hard choices, or because that adversity is, really what is shaping us and
Absolutely.
helping us. I think this is a theme. This was a theme in my life, which really taught me a lot, that the idea that you cannot experience the mountaintop in the way that God intended if you're never in the valley,
So true.
scraping your way through. So
Yeah.
um,
Now, it was called Madeline's Place, right? If I
the
remember right.
sandbox at Madeline's
Yeah.
Place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea was that people could relate and connect and play and have conversation in a place outside the home
Hmm.
where they could also connect and talk about the real things of life, right?
That's
Is it?
right. That's right. And one of the things that I think was just a beautiful part of that is, um, you know, when conflict arose or when things, felt kind of icky or, and, things were going down, like we really were able to have a, timeout and say, what does this look like? The message there is be honest, be kind, and speak up. So again, like let's practice that. Let's call it what it is,
Right.
and kind of role play. What does that mean? And so we got to like not just say, let's be nice to each other. We want to be kind to one another, but really let's dig down and,
Right. Figure out what's going on. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't have time to do that in school because you're going from
Yeah.
one thing to the
Yeah.
next. And so I just felt like it's an after school teen center largely. So, we could have the time to stop and work through those things. And, one of the things that I loved about it is, you could be yourself there. These kids were themselves, whether it wasn't like, oh, I can't talk to you. You're band and I'm athlete and I'm theater and
Yeah.
they were all there. And so when they went back to school, they weren't necessarily best friends, but they knew they had something in common. Um, and connection is just so important.
Absolutely.
um I think for these teens to recognize like maybe we're not best friends, but I know if something is up with me that you we have that
We've worked on some stuff already. Yeah.
yes. So
Do you have a favorite story from Madeline's Place?
I think I probably have several, but a couple have come to mind. There was one young lady who came and we had chairs like similar to this, and she just curled up and went to sleep and woke up and said, that was the best nap ever. And one thing I always heard is like, if you feel comfortable enough to take a nap in my house, then you're comfortable.
Yes. Yes.
So there was that. And then just another favorite that comes to mind is when the kids are like, Miss Billy, can we live here?
Oh,
And just knowing that you created that safe place and
yeah. I love
where
that.
kids want to be.
One of the things I love about that story too is you may know, but my brother lost his son, and when you have a tragedy like that, you're always trying to find some sense of meaning in it. Like, how can this be redeemed? And so one of the things that my brother did was that he created a foundation called the Caleb House, and there were a whole series of homes that were built, orphanages basically, around the world. And one of those orphanages was built in Haiti. And my niece, his daughter, would often go to the orphanage in Haiti and help and serve. And along the way, she met a guy that eventually became her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And now, every time I see Rob and I see the two kids together, I can't help but think that is just like God, to take a tragedy, to take a heartache, and then put something together that could never have happened outside of that tragedy. And I think that's part of how God redeems it. That doesn't mean that that's okay or you're glad it happened, but it just
Absolutely.
means that the tragedy is not the end of the story,
Yeah.
and there are things God can do in the midst of it.
And I also think that, we have to have something to hope in. Otherwise, why do we get up every
Yeah,
day?
right.
You know? And when you don't have that thing that you're hoping in, for me, God, recognizing God in that, starting up this foundation, I can't imagine the pain and grief being a parent or I mean, Madeline, we were pretty close and she would call me her second mom and that kind of thing. But, um, to be able to take that pain and grief and put it in something that, you can get up the next day and the next day and the next day and keep, going.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you.
All right.
So you had that part of your life, and now more recently, you've been serving with the Hutto Chamber of Commerce. So Hutto's a little small town, for those who may not know, in the Austin area. It's a small town outside of Austin. And the big deal over there is the Hutto Hippo.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of our mascot. Carol and I live on the border of Hutto and Round Rock. In fact, out of our backyard, if you go across the fence, we're in Hutto. So sometimes on GPS, it'll come up
As Hutto.
as Hutto. So first of all, tell those who may not know what's the big deal in Hutto. Why is Hutto a great place to work and raise a family?
Yeah. When when we moved out there in 2000, it was specifically for, if we're going to raise a family and raise kids, we wanted to be in a small community and, know our neighbors and all of those things. And we got to do that. Hutto is just, first of all, I think the hippo is the unifier.
Sure
People
is.
rally around that and take some pride
Now
in
tell the
being,
story,
yeah.
the legend behind the hippo.
The legend has it that the circus train was coming through town and stopped, and the hippo escaped in one of our creeks. And so literally had to send a telegraph, right? Telegraph,
Yeah.
down to the other towns to say, stop, hippo on the loose, stop the trains, until they could get the hippo back. But, also legend has it that when it became the school mascot, they were playing against, Hutto was playing against the neighboring town, Taylor. And the fans, it was rainy and muddy. And so the fans in the stands were like, they look like a bunch of hippos down there playing.
And it stuck.
Yeah. So the only hippo mascot in the United States, for a school.
Now, when I was serving on the Hutto board, they even put together a little, and maybe they still do it, a guide. Like if you came to Hutto and you wanted to see where all the like main hippos were, you could get a map. And you could do a little
They still have
scavenger
that.
hunt. Did we still do that?
Yep.
All right. Now, what's your role at the chamber?
So I am the VP and COO, so Chief Operating Officer, although I've nicknamed myself the Chief Connecting Officer.
I love that. That's so true about you too. But
yeah. So really, I was that role was meant to come in and Hutto's growing at such a fast pace, and how to connect the workforce and the economic development that's coming with the resources that are available in the community. And so that has truly been one of my greatest learning curves. Like education, I could talk about that all day. And, so it's been really neat one, I've had to learn the business side of it a little more in depth, and I have a lot more to learn. But really seeing those two worlds come together and say, what do you need and how can we help? Or we have this, so, how does this make a difference? Because the fact of the matter is, if we don't start building that capacity and depth within our workforce, whether it's the service industry or public service or manufacturing, all of those things, and just going back to that idea that what can we do? What I can do might be different than what you can do, but what we can do together could serve, this. And I think that until we start having those conversations and getting around the table and kind of hashing that out, so that's really what I've been, working towards. What does that look like to bring all these worlds together? And when we're in a room, who do you need to know? But more importantly, who needs to know you?
Yeah.
And, that's how it starts. And maybe today, it's just a good to meet you kind of thing. But maybe tomorrow you're like, oh, what about,
Yeah.
so I love that. I love seeing, how those opportunities connect and
Perfect.
yeah.
Now, speaking of the growth, we've been talking about this in the community. I wrote for Hutto Living Magazine, as you might know, and I served on the board in Hutto at the chamber. And so one of the questions we've been asking and dealing with for quite some time now is that, you have all these people from all around the country moving to Texas, and Hutto is the beneficiary, maybe in some ways a beneficiary, but for others it's like, no, we want to keep this a small town. So what are some of the things that like you're doing and the chamber may be doing? Because I think, and the reason I'm curious about it is not just relevant for Hutto, but it's for, other communities and other people that might be listening who are kind of facing that same dilemma. I think it's better. I've been a part of, when I was living in Missouri, I was a part of some organizations that were dealing with a dying town. And that's really hard, kids leaving and population aging and things dying. I mean, that's no fun. But this is no less of a challenge when you are in a community where a lot of the core was there because they wanted a small town feel away from the busyness of Austin. And now you have all these things coming to Hutto, and it's changing the dynamic of the town. So how do you strategically hold the small town vibe while accommodating the growth?
Yeah, that's a great question, and in one for sure that is talked about a lot in our community. And so our physical location of the chamber is located in a part of Old Town Hutto, so downtown, historic, area. And so I've been thinking a lot about that question in general, just sitting there, like saying, what is it? And also, what can we do? Maybe we can't do everything, but what can we do? And I just wonder if, I feel strongly that in these growing communities, yes, there's the population that is like, no, we want the small town. It just seems like to me, and maybe this is pie in the sky. I tend to be like that rainbows and kind of thinker, but how just deciding that if that's important to us, keeping that old, small town charm, old downtown charm, then let's really focus on Hutto's growing. There's no doubt whether we want that or not,
Right,
it's
it's coming.
happening. So how do we preserve what we can preserve, and let's decide what that looks like. Let's decide. I think that it's so important oftentimes that if you want to see something, be the leader in those, bringing people together. Not that you have all the answers, but, lead that charge if that's what you want to see. And the downtown Hutto businesses are kind of starting to come together and talk about what makes sense down here. And
Uh-huh.
I think that's the key, keep those pockets of downtown, old town, and decide that, like this radius, this, area, we're going to really concentrate on um, how we're going to let the growth affect us.
Yeah.
And then let the other partners, let the other city partners, decide around the large part of the community, because that's happening. So let them be the experts in what they're,
Yes.
and kind of, I don't know. Again, that I might just be like overthinking that, but I think that downtown Hutto has such a unique, maybe unique to us. Everybody has their own
Yeah,
downtown, but just that charm
it
and that
does.
history, so much history down there.
Yeah.
So let's just decide. It's kind of like, I'll talk about God a lot because that is important in my life,
Yeah. No,
but
please.
it's kind of that idea that, um, you got to decide ahead of time, how you're going to respond, because you're not always going to feel it. I say this in marriage often. I say it, in so many things, like you're not always going to feel loving or feel like you want to love your spouse, but you decide ahead of time that this is the commitment. Like, God, I love you more
Yeah.
than this marriage, and I'm going to honor you. And so bringing that back to the downtown, if that is important to us and we're going to decide ahead of time that this is what we're going to commit to, and this is, what we want to preserve, and just go about it in that way.
Yeah.
Not saying no to the growth, but we're saying we want to protect this part of it,
Yeah.
in this way. So just making those decisions ahead of the feelings, because the feelings, you cannot trust your feelings.
So true. One of the things that I learned as I was writing for Hutto Living was that the people I would interview, and I would ask them why they came to Hutto. And one of the things that I continued to hear was that they said, there's just something about the city. There's something about the town. There's something about the vibe, and the hippo's part of it, but it's, football, it's the downtown. And I think, and I hope I'm not being too idealistic about this, but one of the questions that I love to think about is, well, if there are that many people who are being attracted to the same thing, then that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're all wanting to do, they're wanting to keep the things that are unique about Hutto.
True.
So let's celebrate that, as opposed to thinking, well, growth necessarily means it's not going to stay the same.
Right.
Growth can mean, hey, the people that are attracted to this want the same thing. And the other thing I think the Chamber does such a great job on is all the activities and events, right? So there's some traditions with, the crab, what is it? The
Crawfish Festival.
Crawfish Festival, Old Time Days.
Yeah, this year's our 40th anniversary for the Old Time Days. So we've got some fun, special things planned.
So there's bands, there's booze, there's all kinds of things. And I think even just kind of continuing those traditions helps to, reinforce the fact that these are some of our values. These are the things that we hold dear to us.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges to that point also is how do we leverage that and also value our downtown neighbors? Maybe, the Chamber of Commerce is a membership driven organization. So our focus is on our members and what we're providing, the value we're providing to them. But that doesn't mean that we can't be good neighbors,
Right.
And so helping everybody to buy in and understand how these events could support. And maybe that's just thinking outside of the box and creatively about, what can my business do? I'm not a chamber member for whatever reason. Okay, but as a good neighbor, how can we get to a yes?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. All right. So now you look at your life for maybe next couple years. What excites you? Or what are you looking forward to?
Well, personally, I am just 2 classes away from my master's degree.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you. Going back to loving school, my kids will say that. I put myself through college while raising them. And so got my associates and bachelor's, and I was like, let's just keep going. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to
What's your degree
be
in?
done. It is strategic leadership and organizational management.
Wow.
So really,
Perfect.
it is falling right in line with the work and the growth and opportunities. And why I was hired for the chamber.
That's great.
The events are great, and they are a community builder, and they support our membership through allowing them to be part of that and bringing the community together. But as we're growing, also, we've got to be really mindful of how are we supporting the small businesses and bringing education and resources to them while, adding value to our large businesses and community partners and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
just a wide open door. And I am just always thinking about, like, what if we, what if we tried that? What if, and so maybe the answer isn't always yes, but if you never ask the question, you're never going to
Right.
start the conversation. So
Awesome.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see how Hutto, maneuvers and to your point, people are passionate about our community, and
Yeah.
I think everybody wants that feel. Everybody just has a different way to get there. So I'm excited to see how we, navigate through that and get to a place where, we're all just really proud and people are excited to come to our community, and keeping that going. And I mean, just personally, I'm excited to be a part of that, to get to say, like, yeah, I was a part of that,
That's
whatever
awesome.
part that is.
Yeah. Well, I think you're a great person for it.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time to be with us. I always have one last question that I'd like to ask, which is, and I have a little sneaky suspicion I know what the answer to this one is, but I want to see if I'm right. If you had a life mission statement, if you had something that would say, "This is my true north," how would you describe it?
I mean, my true north is like, God, what do you have for me today? I can get off track and myself, and trust me, I get into my feelings and all of those things, but just keep coming back to, how do I bring you honor? I don't want people to see me. I want people to see God in me. And I sometimes I miss the mark, and
You're
I'm
so
human.
unusual that way.
But yeah, like what, God, you have created me with a passion and a drive to serve others, and how do I do that in a way that honors Him, and also gives me the freedom to celebrate that the way He
Yeah.
created me.
Love that. That's kind of where I thought you would head, but it's good to hear it from you and the way you would put it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Sidewalk Conversations. If you like this episode and you think there may be somebody who could be helped by it, feel free to like and share, and join us again next week.